especially today. When you said getting by, it just resonated with me because I think many dealers are gross drunk right now, and it's easy to get by. I'm afraid that most of us are in for a rude awakening. There's a storm brewing out there, and when that
Yeah.
storm makes landfall, if we're just getting by, we're going to have a severe wake-up call.
Hello, I am Dennis McGinn, founder and CEO of vehicle reconditioning and communications company, Rapid Recon. Welcome to your place. At your place, we visit guests at their place of business to engage in conversations about the auto industry. Today, we have David Long, Executive GM for Hansel Auto Group, family-owned business since 1961. Welcome, David. And would you give us a little idea of your background and how things work at Hansel?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's good to see you again, Dennis. I have admired your career for many years. I respect what you do in the industry, and you are certainly, without question, one of the thought leaders. So when Jim asked me if I wanted to join, I was absolutely, I'll make time. So I'm the executive general manager of Hansel, as you said. We're right outside of Napa, California, in a beautiful place, Sonoma County. We have 8 rooftops. We have a little over 500 of the most amazing people. And the 2 owners, Henry and Justin Hansel, are, and I don't say, you can cut this out if you want, but 2 of the best owners, if not the best owners I've ever had the opportunity to work with in 37 years. That's how long I've been doing it. I'm glad I'm in the twilight of my career and, getting ready in the next 5 to 7 years to sail off into the sunset. And I couldn't think of a better group to do that for. So, and I'm glad to be here with you, Dennis.
Yeah, and I've known Henry for a while. Didn't know his brother, I think, but an impressive gentleman of great regard, and what a reputation. And all the people that I've worked with at your organization have been top notch. So, congratulations to you. I mean, you're in one of the best positions I can think of.
Hey, Dennis, I've traveled
yes.
the country, and I got to tell you, there's no one like Henry and Justin. By the way, Justin's the son, and Justin's
okay.
3rd generation, and the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Everything that Henry has, along with the emotional intelligence and the interpersonal relationship skills at a completely different level, is what Justin brings to the team. So it's an amazing opportunity, and I'm really glad to be here for the last 3 years.
That's terrific. I love hearing those things. Nothing drives people harder to succeed than really respecting the people they work for. I mean, I totally get that. David, tell us a little bit about you've got 8 franchises, and of course, this last year and a half have been just where are we going to get cars to sell? We're not going to get them in the auction anymore. So how have you been finding the inventory you need to keep your stores with vehicles to sell?
So it's a super interesting question, one of which may not be popular. My answer may not be popular. And really, it's counterintuitive to what I've always done. So I don't know if you know, but and I say this and I feel a little uncomfortable, but Dale Pollock said a few years back when I ran the Del Grand Dealer Group as the used vehicle director, he said it was the most efficient, well-run used car operation in the country. And looking back at that, all I can see is the holes, the things that I didn't know. And you don't know what you don't know, right? But looking back, even though Dale had, real high regard, held us in high regard, I think we were doing a lot of things wrong. And what really changed my mind was the pandemic and the limited availability. So all the things I thought I knew going into the pandemic, I realized very quickly were not going to work. So I had to pivot in a way. Like I was the guy that would have a team of people out there buying cars at auction. we'd be stepping up for trades, which I still do, right? We still do as a group, but it's just a different model, Dennis. So where I would have 1,100 sales out of an 800 car inventory, now I'm completely the opposite. And when I say opposite of that, Dennis, what I mean is I would much rather have 100 cars and sell 100 cars at 5 times the margin than have 500 cars and sell 500 cars. And that is counterintuitive. So for me, it's all about the right car at the right time at the right store. And we're turning them, in the average of 25, 30 days and making all the money, and it's working out.
That's really great to hear. I guess my comment on that is, and having talked with a lot of people, it looks like we're going to be busy this coming year trying to help salespeople remember what selling value is all about. And so, it's like, hey, this has been a little too easy. Maybe we're going to have to get back to some of the basics. But you probably already know all that. But can you? So as far as are you still buying cars from auction?
I'm not. Haven't bought a car from auction in 120 or more days. Not one.
Okay. So in addition to your customer, your service drive, your customer pay, your trade opportunities, is that keeping you in enough inventory to keep your plan on track?
Well, I always say enough is never enough. So I always want more. And I don't know if you know this about me, but I've opened 58 buy centers from here to Brazil. I don't know if you knew that part of what I do.
I didn't know that. I'd like to hear about that.
Yeah, so it's a technology that I actually developed in Palo Alto, of all places. And it
in my town,
in your town, right in your backyard, with 2 guys with MBAs from MIT. We A/B tested everything. We were in a Palo Alto roll-up door office space, and we just bought cars from private party, and we dialed it in and eventually sold that to Carvana. And I use that same technology with some iteration today to help others in the country and out of the country build buy centers. So that is a source. The most successful buy center we have and had was buying 250 cars a month off for sale by owners. So it's a really great technology, and that is the best place in my experience to acquire inventory.
And how this is kind of a framing question, but how many cars would your buying center have to actually go through to get to one? What was the percentage, and how did your system you developed help get down to the ones that are the best ones?
So interesting you say that, the best ones. They're all the best ones. So whether it's $100 car or $100,000 car, they're all the best ones as long as we have a strategy for the best end user. Right? So the way the buy centers operate is they're fully self-supported through wholesale contribution. So if you buy 100 cars, 10% of them need to be earmarked for wholesale at minimum to pay for V-Auto, VIN Solutions, overhead, rent and equivalent, all personnel expense. So the buy centers that open should have zero draw on the expense of the company. It should be a net zero, and all the gross should go to the net to gross. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And so you're funding your buying center off wholesaling 10% of the cars?
Correct. All the buy centers that operate efficiently have a balance sheet, and those balance sheets need to always read zero or positive if they're running efficiently. And there's a lot of expense that comes into opening a buy center, even if it's a tuck-in versus a standalone. Right? Yeah. They both have expenses. The standalone, of course, has more, which means you have to buy more and wholesale more and generate more wholesale profit. But it's just the way the business model is set up that's worked really well.
This was kind of a question, which is that how many cars would your people look at before they would decide what kind of general ratio would they have of percentage of ones that would be acceptable versus the number that they had to go through?
So there's several different funnels, and let me be clear. When I talk about Brazil, we're not sourcing cars in Brazil, bringing them here and selling them. There's buy centers that the technology and the business model opened up in Brazil, and then there's buy centers throughout the country. But the number, to get to your question, the number of cars that one would look through is there's two different funnels, two main funnels. One is the KBBICO funnel, and the other funnel is the for sale by owner, the Craigslist, the cars.com, the Auto Trader, customers selling their car. It is totally transparent. So this model gives every customer an instant cash offer. The more instant cash offers we can give, the more opportunity we have to set the appointment. The more appointments we have, of course, the more cars we buy. And that we do not discriminate against any car at any time.
Okay.
Ever. Every car should be bought at a number that we can feel good about, as long as we have an exit strategy that feels good to us.
And you said of the cars you buy, 10% of them are identified as wholesale opportunities, and from that is how you make the math work for your funding your operations.
So, for instance, if you're a GM and you're like, I want to open a buy center, but the owner of the company doesn't want to incur any additional expense, the way the buy center set up, because if I'm operating a store, like we have 8 stores, every store needs to keep 30 to 35 cents on the dollar, right? Every time we generate $1 of gross, we have to keep 35 cents. Well, if you're a dealer or you're a GM and you're paid off of the net, not the gross, you want to make sure that you don't keep adding on additional expense. So the model for the buy center is you open it and it funds itself through wholesale contribution. So you should never draw against your net to gross. It should only add to it. So that's exactly what each and every buy center that's opened has formulated the game plan to produce a zero expense to the company.
Okay. That's fascinating. I didn't know about this model, but I can imagine that it, I get it. I understand how it's set up, and to make that work, you have to have enough volume and the right kind of people to execute it. And so today, how many of your people are dedicated to your buying centers?
Well, for all the buy centers, it's an average of 25 to 30 cars a person, right? So that's the math. The buy center, the one that opened in San Jose, we had a young man, for example, that was a porter. He was parking cars and putting stickers on cars. He took the technology, he used it with consistency. He was buying one car at a time, 50 a month. Right? And this is a young man that was never a salesperson, was never a sales manager, didn't know V Auto from a hole in the wall. And because of the technology and the word tracks and the business model, he was able to buy 50 cars a month. And by the way, if you went up to a GM or a dealer and said, if I could show you a way to buy 100 cars a month from people you would never meet otherwise and cars you could never find anywhere else, it would generate you $300,000 of additional gross. Would you be interested? I don't know any GMs that say no, but the ones that say yes are usually not prepared for the amount of effort and energy it goes into doing it. Does that make sense? But in other words, if I could give you a business model that was easy, everybody in the world would have a buy center. But it's so freaking hard, Dennis. It takes so much effort and so much energy to get one person trained up enough to buy 30 cars a month. So unless you're going to the auction and you just have your hand up. Right? If you're going to the auction and you're just the last guy with your hand up, or gal, that's easy. Not always profitable, but it's easy. It's a lot easier than calling customers and trying to get them to come in. So that's I love the example with the porter, and I bet it really changed that young person's life totally. Well, they went from making $14 an hour to $125,000 a year. That was pretty good.
That is a great story, and so you developed that model before you came to Hansel. You had that figured out, and then you brought that model and you put that into the Hansel group
It's
using the
installed.
same approach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It is now installed. I will tell you. So I've been there almost 3 years, and when I first got there, I don't know if you know about the wildfires in Sonoma County.
of course. Yeah,
Um,
of course.
like in the first 3 months, 4 months of being there, the whole town was on fire. Right, the air quality index. I couldn't see out my window to the other store that I operate. It's only a parking lot away. That's the air quality. And then we had a cyber attack that completely closed us down, and we had to pay a ransom. It was like something you'd see in a sci-fi movie. And then we
Yeah,
rolled right into the to COVID, where I had to lay off every single employee and then figure out who we were going to bring back and how we were going to reopen. So just recently, we've opened the buy center, and I'm super excited. We use a product called Van. I don't know if you know what that is. You
oh
familiar with
yeah,
it?
the vehicle acquisition network. Yeah,
Correct.
I know
So
the guys in Chicago that started that, and in Florida.
yeah, Tom and
I
Bill do a great job. It'd be hard to succeed
Yeah,
without a product like that.
yeah,
Yeah. But I
yeah,
didn't know
very
we were going to go
impressive.
down this rabbit hole. What's that?
No, it's very impressive. I know the guys, and known them for quite a while in their model. Met a bunch of the people that work with them around the country. But yeah, I really like those guys. Again, at this point, after doing a bunch of things right and probably a lot of things not so right, you get to choose the people you work with. I think that's really the ultimate goal. Um, in my thing, and you know, I knew Sean Del Grand back when they, bought Lewis's stuff. So I go way back with
Right.
that deal. Oh yeah,
He
I don't know if you
he
knew
is
knew that.
him and his dad Kevin, Sean and
Yeah,
Kevin are again. They're like Henry and Justin. Like I don't know how I've gotten so lucky to work for two of the best auto groups in the country, but I have.
yeah, smart people, obviously. I don't know. I've met Kevin, but Sean I know reasonably well, and what a smart guy. And no effort. Uh, you know, Willing to put in whatever it takes to get things on the right track. Tell me just a little bit about kind of looking forward into the rest of this year. And of course, I'm writing about this and I'm trying to gather as much information as possible. How do you see your business evolving going into next year? Is it going to change in terms of, uh, you know, where you're going to get inventory from, how to keep your customers happy, that kind of thing? What are your thoughts and priorities in looking at the next 9 months?
One thing I know for a fact, it's going to change. I just know that for a fact. So, and you may not be aware of this, but I have a morning talk show on Friday mornings with 1,200 members, and
Okay.
all automotive related. This week, and the reason that I started it 61 weeks ago tomorrow. And it's every Friday at 6 a.m. our time, Dennis. A little early for some of us, but 6 a.m. every Friday. This week, Steve Greenfield, and the topic is future of automotive. And
Okay.
the off show preparation that we're doing, there are significant changes headed our way. And then the week after that, we have Jonathan Smoke, the chief economist for Cox Automotive.
Oh,
He'll
I
be
know
on.
Jonathan. Yeah.
So between those two guys in the last 60 episodes, I have learned more in those 1 hour live shows than I've learned in the last 37 years in this business. And the things that I've picked up recently, consumer experience, consumer demand, what's going on, what the consumer is going to absolutely not put up with in the future, And I think that that's been the memo that most of us have missed. Like we've gotten the memo, but we haven't read it. Or if we did read it, we've ignored it. The shift in consumer sentiment and what the guests are going to experience here forward is going to be more likened to the Amazon experience, in my opinion. The person that comes in and goes through the would you if I could and the lot tours and all the crazy nonsense that we've done and the silent appraisals. You remember the old silent appraisals where you'd walk out to the car and you'd look at it and you'd make all these sounds? Do you know about that part of the business?
No, I
Good.
don't.
Well, all that crazy nonsense that we've done for 37 years I've been doing this, those days are over. Just some of us didn't read the memo. So in these next 6 months, 12 months, or a year, or years, consumers are going to transact, in my experience, and I see it coming, more online, where they just come in and pick it up or have it dropped off at their home. I see that more and more every day. What do you see?
Well, I'm fascinated with the groups I'm working with, starting with Lithia, because I think that what they're doing is really smart, and I really appreciate it. And the people that are, that are putting driveway together, for instance, Mike Kavanaugh, these guys are really sharp, and I love I go way back to the CarMax model when they started. They built it out of Circuit City. They had standard KPIs, standard processes across everything that they did, and they were able to scale that to where the earnings per share every quarter were like clockwork for 17 years. Nobody's ever done that before. And now you have across the country, you've got a lot of groups that are using their capital to buy other groups. They're looking to kind of get the biggest footprint. I mean, that's certainly what Lithia is doing, and I'm working with them. But they are also wanting to be the most transparent in the industry, because trust is a big deal, and they understand that whole thing, that behavior. And of course, now all of a sudden, the work we do to recondition the car and the visibility, taking the visibility of what value did you add through reconditioning, becomes even a bigger deal. So I've learned a lot last year in terms of why that's so important. And we don't have it right yet, but we're getting there in terms of that, so that the customers can either go to the website and there's enough information there, not just the Carfax, but the Recon facts, FACS, are there alongside everything else, so they have a good idea. And like I said, if they know they're paying a lot for the cars, they know that they don't have a lot of choices, so they're making decisions. They're paying a premium. They know it. They're not oblivious to this thing. So they're thinking. This is my view. They're thinking about, okay, these cars last longer. I'm paying a premium. I'm going to keep this car. I want to make sure I get the one that I want to have as much information about this car and why I should trust it when I give it to my parents or my son or my daughter or my whatever. And so those people are going to be in the ecosystem. I mean, we also know that still 70% of the post-service work for used cars goes outside. So how do we build trust in those connections so that our people are not salespeople? They're trusted advisors. They're the ones that keep the customer through a generation and keep them feeling like they want to work with you. They want to work with the people that are in your operation and that have the same value you do. So yeah, I mean that's kind of where my thinking is going. And we've been working with iPacket and people like that have been doing this. Something I never thought I'd do. Worry about how this stuff gets on your website, But boy, I'm full on there. And to me, there's another aspect of this too. I mean, why shouldn't the technicians actually be able to see what the customers are looking at? In other words, they're doing all the work, and they're assuming, the customers are buying the cars, but there's no reason with what we have today that they shouldn't be able to see, to review, oh, well, what are the things that are most important to the buyers that they're looking at having to do with reconditioning. And I'm thinking, if I were a group or an owner, I'd want them to know that. I mean, it's part of their job, right? They should get feedback as to what's important to the customers, and it's going to continue to evolve. So that's kind of in my mind too. I want to be able to take and have that connection all the way from the decision on what to put in the car, what to invest in the car, what value to add, and the people are doing it all the way through to what the customers are looking at and what are the reasons they're making a decision that they're going to spend money and they a premium, in this case, a premium
Mm-hmm.
for a car that they're going to want to keep. So that's how
I totally
that's kind
agree.
of how, yeah.
I
So
could
and
not agree more. And I think we need to get to the place, personally, my opinion is, where we'll always, in my experience and opinion, need salespeople, but the customer today should have a buying process. We shouldn't have a selling process. In other words, it needs to be custom. It needs to be like a snowflake. Every customer is different, right? They want to use
Yep.
you wherever they need to use you, as the salesperson or the product specialist or the trusted advisor.
Yep.
But you're a resource, right? You're not the means to the end. You're just a resource along the path. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and I think those people, the ones that I know that I use that for that, when I think of something, and I say, okay, I'm going to call him because I've always relied on him. He's going to give me good advice, and I think that's what you want to do. And the communication is not a problem anymore. We can communicate with
No.
each other at will, and but
Well,
it
it's
is.
funny. You say communication's not a problem, but I think I'd push back a little bit on that. I don't think
Okay.
most dealers communicate. I don't think most dealers listen. I don't think most dealers pay attention to what the customer's really asking for. I think our agenda sometimes overlaps and doesn't really appeal to what the customer's most dominant buying motives are. Why?
Yeah.
Because we're not paying attention. That's my opinion. You know what the biggest
Yeah.
problem with communication is, Dennis?
No.
People think it's actually happening. It's not. There's two separate agendas, two different goals, and oftentimes they don't come together. So
Yeah.
I think as a dealer body, we need to get better at that. For God's sakes, if we were good at that, we would have changed what we were doing 30 years ago. But we have
Yeah.
been so deaf to what the consumer's asking for and oblivious to what the consumers need today that it took us, probably 30 years too long to listen. So we're not communicating properly in many respects, my opinion.
That's really good insight. I was talking a little bit more about your trusted advisor being able to communicate with somebody like that. That they want it, they're available, but they love being asked to be helped. That's part of their job. And so I'm thinking too, keeping the people that do all the work happy with what they're doing. I think part of that, what I want to do is make sure they see the value of what they're doing. Where does it go? How are you making the decisions on what work you want me to do to add value to this car? Why is it important to the customers? So that's a
Totally agree.
thought. But as far as the bigger picture and the dealers, I mean, right, you've been there, done that, and you're supposed to have all the answers as a general manager, right? When you come into the job, everybody's looking at you for all the answers, and so if you don't have them, you make them up, and and so I've seen an awful lot of that. They're not using the data and the information in order to make decisions. They're doing it the way they were doing it before until something goes wrong, and they have a bonfire somewhere or an employee issue, that kind of thing. But
I think that's the benefit of being simple-minded and not, as I definitely don't know all the answers, and I am comfortable at my age and my stage of my career telling people I don't know, but we together need to figure it out. Because
Yeah,
the more I think I know, probably the less effective I am.
yeah. I, yes. I love your posture, your attitude towards this too, because I feel this industry, having come from Hewlett Packard, from the technology industry, and watching, trying to bring change into this, starting with accountability for reconditioning, because that's where I came in. Nobody wanted to be accountable. They said, I don't trust anybody. Nobody really knows what I'm doing, and I kind of like it that way. And
Right.
so as you would be preparing to go off your 20 group meeting, you would always get the best case information from your people. Right? It's like they didn't want to send you off with embarrassing numbers, so that's what you got. As a result, you didn't really know where you stood. And that, in
Yeah.
the beginning, when I started this company, that was the thing I noticed was there's going to have to be a behavioral change. We're going to have to give, starting with the technicians, a way for them to say, I'm done. Here's a button on my phone. Look, everybody knows. You don't need to ask me anything. And I trust the information because I'm the one pushing the button. And so
Right.
that's kind of how it started. It was all a behavioral thing. And I'm thinking, the way it was before makes no sense. And and so that's what we've done. We basically put a dent in that whole thing. But the way I look at it is, still the majority of the dealers out there are still getting by with doing it without all the information. So we're still at the early phase, I think, of what I do for the industry, of people feeling like they own it and that they now are really comfortable. But I've got all my ways that I'm going to change that. I mean, we've got a good start on that, and you've seen some of that in your own operations with our software. But I
I think
really, I really,
you said the two most important words in this whole time together: getting by. Especially today. When you said getting by, it just resonated with me because I think many dealers are gross drunk right now, and it's easy to get by. I'm afraid that most of us are in for a rude awakening. There's a storm brewing out there, and when that
yeah,
storm makes landfall, if we're just getting by, we're going to have a severe wake up call. So that's
yeah,
where all of the things that you're mentioning and all the things that you're doing in your company, like if we take heed on those things, then we will not just be getting by, and we'll be able to weather the definite storm that's going to make landfall. So I love when you said getting by.
yeah. No, and I, I live in this world on a daily, hourly basis, probably way more than I should. But I love the business. I mean, we all love the business, or we wouldn't do it. And
Right.
and I'm yeah I'm one of these guys that can't resist a challenge. I mean, so even at Hewlett Packard, they had a big problem. They'd have a fire burning in Hamtramck where they were putting all the robots in place to be able to push all the luxury cars out, and it didn't work. So they grabbed me and said, "Here, would you go figure this out?" I said, "Yeah, all I have to do is ship 100 engineers to Detroit to work next alongside EDS for an unknown period of time, and they're all going to hate me." And that's exactly what we did. Except they didn't hate me. At the end of it, they came back and found out none of their friends had ever had an experience like that. It was like going to war, but not having to shoot anybody. So
I think a
but
lot of
I
what
thought,
we're headed into is going to be like going to war. We need
yeah,
to be battle ready. As a matter of fact, it's funny you said that because Sean Del Grand, you mentioned him earlier.
yeah,
When we first started our relationship, I knew nothing about used cars, knew nothing about reconditioning, knew nothing about nothing. And he said, well, why don't you be my used car director for all 16 of my stores? And I said, well, you do realize I know nothing about nothing, right? He's like, that's perfect. We're going to figure it out together because I don't either. And we had a blank piece of paper and I sketched out this harebrained idea about how we should buy cars from private party. And then we
Yeah.
hired two of the smartest guys on the planet with MBAs from MIT, and we started word tracking and role playing and testing, and that's how it was created. A lot like you did with the robot. Same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. 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 That's exactly right. And then that was back in the time when the electronics were still mostly analog in the cars, and the technicians were throwing parts. This was with Ford. Were throwing parts at the cars because they didn't know what to do. They didn't have any diagnostic help, and Dearborn needed badly to know what was failing early on. So that was another phase of what I did at HP, which is to build the Ford Service Bay diagnostic system, which went worldwide. But that was kind of combining, instrumentation back then that had to be analog before you had ODB2, and so you didn't have a lot of digital help. But you needed to. The warranty costs were going out of sight right back then, and so that was a huge concern. So that was quite a fascinating deal for me, because there were only two companies in the world that could do that, IBM and HP. And IBM came to me and said, "Well, can we buy the instrumentation from you?" And I said, "No." So that was the end of that discussion. And one of the phases.
That's fascinating to me. I could listen to these stories all day. I love that. I didn't know you had that much to do on the HP side with automotive. I didn't realize that.
Yes, I did. And I inherited a division of engineers that were really put in place to do business with Roger Smith's people and with Don Peterson's people in Detroit, because back then, the executives, John Young and those guys, they were very clear. If you don't have people in Detroit, you don't understand us, you don't understand our business, we're not going to work with you. So that was what was done. It was they put that thing together, and it was basically imploding. So, how Mikey likes it. This was Dennis likes it. So they kind of rolled me into that.
I know. Let's get Dennis. He'll eat it. He'll eat anything.
Oh yeah. Dennis won't. He loves this kind of stuff.
Dennis, not everybody knows what we're talking about. You know that not everybody knows when you said get Mikey will do it. Not everybody knows what we're talking about. It's only us old guys that know that.
Well, any of them are watching this show now, they can ask for details or Google Mikey likes it, and maybe hear about those stories. Well, anyway, David, I really appreciate your time. This has been fascinating, and I love seeing your dog in the back trying to figure out how to climb up in that tree or whatever he's doing. So
he's a 1-year-old golden that just is uncontainable. So anyway,
that's the kind of energy we need.
I wish I could bottle it for guys like you and I, but I think we have enough energy. But it's great spending time with you. I really enjoyed it more than I even imagined.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. So we'll talk soon.